progress here, time here.
Yeah.
Where are we right now?
Oh, that's a good question. We're probably about here.
Okay, so we're not halfway.
Oh no, I don't think so. This is just the beginning of the AI kind of like boom, I would say. If you zoom out, we've had like the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and it's like we will be known as the Silicon Age.
Is AI's intelligence like human intelligence?
No.
Can it create?
It cannot create in sort of the truest sense. What it can do though is you can cross concepts with it.
Fundamental scientific aspects remain at present unknown. So, is that true?
Yes, we don't fully understand how they work. And I like saying that because that's a little bit like, oh my goodness, it's gonna gain consciousness and take over. And okay, in my mind, that's absolutely ridiculous. As someone who has been plugged into and seeing kind of like what's on the horizon for a lot of these new AI technologies, I'm just like, oh yeah, it's gonna get people sucked right in.
You think that's all coming?
It is all coming.
Mark Matthews.
Ken Yuzinski.
I'm so pleased that you're here.
I'm honored to be here. So
we're going to talk about AI because you know a lot more about AI than the average person. And without revealing anything confidential,
Sure.
Can you share your experience with AI?
Oh, sure. So my background is, I worked in the visual effects industry for 10 years. So research and development, so professional computer programmer, button pusher kind of a thing. And then I went to go work for, we'll just say, a nameless tech company. And I'm now a research scientist in AI. And so I've been with them for almost 10 years. I've learned a ton. I've kind of been around for the rise of AI.
So you've been there since the inception of it, or when did this start?
Good question. So everybody kind of regards it as 2012 as being kind of the turning point. And there was a lot of this happens in academic circles. And so there was a particular way of approaching AI, and everybody on the inside calls it machine learning, just because intelligence, saying artificial intelligence is kind of like a very undefined concept. But there was an approach of using neural networks that people had kind of largely abandoned. And someone showed, oh, you can actually get really good results with them in 2012. And so that kind of kicked off a whole sort of revival or renaissance in sort of the AI world.
And when did you enter the space?
2017. So kind of like, 5 years after that. And so
fairly early in the...
in the revival, I guess you could say.
So we are going to talk later on Pope Francis's encyclical and his thoughts on AI. But I want to kind of grasp first, get better understanding of where we're at in the projection and development of AI. Because I'm not a charts guy, but I want to draw something here.
Okay, sure.
So if we did a graph. And on this side, we have progress. That's a bad P.
Okay.
Down here, we have time. And let's say that was 2012. So it kicks off. And then usually we have something like that, and it tapers off. With progress here, time here. Where are we right now?
Oh, that's a good question. And this kind of being the point where the technology is well developed. It gets boring. I'm going to say this. I don't see it slowing down until at least, let's say, 2040, 2050.
2040. So we might...
Let's just call this point here 2050.
That's 2050.
That's 2050. Yeah. And so I guess we would be what? If that's 2050, that's 2012, we're probably about here, would be my guess.
Okay. So we're not halfway.
Oh, no, I don't think so. Yeah. I think there's a lot more we can... This is just the begin, and this is just the beginning of the AI kind of like boom, I would say. Yeah, I don't see it. If I think about when will we have sort of really exhausted AI research? I can't see that coming for a long time.
And is it possible that this could be really off? 2050, you said?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe it's not going to be 2030. That's only in 4 years. Maybe 2040, maybe things will start to be slowing down by then. But if I wanted a sure bet of when I think things will get a little bit boring by, I'd say 2050.
Okay, so the next 25 years.
The next 25 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you zoom out and you take a look at the progress of humanity, like, we've had the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and it's like we will be known as the Silicon Age. And I think that AI will sort of be regarded as the crowning achievement of the Silicon Age. And you think of the Industrial Revolution, like that was 1890. So, and kind of the IT Silicon Revolution really only started in like the 70s-ish kind of a thing. So, but on a grand historic timescale, like that's just a little blip.
So you're in the middle of this revolution.
I think
you're almost like ground zero, shortly after the really takeoff, and you entered into it.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
Wow.
So
not too many people. I don't have any other friends.
Okay,
who are in this space. So I thought, you're the guy.
And watch out, because I love talking about it. So I'm gonna bore your ears. I'm gonna bore your viewers to death. So,
well, when we look at Pope Francis, so the church is typically a little bit slower in responding to things historically, but the world is progressing faster and faster. Pope Leo, issuing his encyclical letter. I think many people were thinking it would be concentrated more heavily on AI, at least I was.
Yeah.
There's certainly sections in there, but it's, I think, a commentary, teaching on social doctrine of the church.
Yeah.
With sprinklings of AI in there. Pretty heavy sprinklings of AI.
And I think that's fair. I mean, I think it might be a little bit too much to focus just exclusively on AI, but he's also had other documents and letters come out from the Dicastery for Proclamation of the Faith or something, but Quo Vadis Humanitas, Where Are You Going, Humanity, and then Antiqua et Nova. And so some of those also focus sort of on more of the minutia of AI.
Okay, not only are you great with machine learning and computer language, but your Latin's pretty good too.
Ooh, well, thank you. But my Latin, very good.
When you read through sections of the encyclical, what was your first impression?
My first impression was, this is amazing. This puts into words, much clearer words and more inspired words than I could have come up with. Things that I've sort of been trying to say about AI and technology in general. I'm just like, oh yeah, that's the right way of saying it. So I feel very kind of encouraged. And I'm just like, not to brag, but I'm like, yeah, we're on the same wavelength. We're in tune. I'm thrilled.
Okay. So there's a couple of things when I was reading through it that I just wasn't sure about, because I don't know the AI. I'm not in that space.
Yeah.
Pope Leo has consulted the experts and then wrote something about AI.
Yep.
You are, in one sense, an expert in AI. So I wanted to know if some of his perceptions are accurate.
Yeah.
So a couple paragraphs here that I wanted to bring out to you. And then one is paragraph 95.
Okay.
Pope Leo has a concern about too few people having control about AI. And so this is what he says. When such power is concentrated in the hands of a few, it tends to become opaque and evade public oversight, increasing the risk of distorted forms of development that gives rise to new dependencies, exclusions, manipulations, and inequalities. Okay, so when I thought that, I thought, is that true? Is there a danger of the AI technology just being in the hands of a few, or is the market, let's say, pretty wide open and with many, many players here?
Okay, so to take a step back, to kind of maybe put this in another context, you don't even need to think about AI in this regard. You could think of just even like a social media platform, right? And you could think of it, we could think about recommendation algorithms, which are kind of like a very mild form of machine learning. And with a recommendation algorithm, like any of the social media companies sort of regard like exactly kind of what goes into the quote unquote algorithm is like their secret sauce, right? And they want to basically suppress things that are boring and spammy or things that people are not going to want to watch or see. And they're going to want to promote things that are going to want to keep you on that platform. Now, the risk is that these social media platforms kind of almost become as important as, say, like the roadways, right? And we have to police our roadways. We have to police sidewalks. We can't just let anyone do whatever they want there, set up a business or whatever. And so we as a society have, we come up with laws for those kinds of things. And so the question is kind of like, well, yeah, how do you, as a society then, when sort of a platform maybe becomes so important, but you've got a company that might be making those decisions, like, is that kind of what we want as a society? Now, on the other hand, too, the amount of effort it takes to put together a platform like that is not trivial. It's a tremendous amount of work to develop, the infrastructure and everything, and even to kind of come up with that sort of potentially that algorithm in the first place. So I think these are sort of problems that are already in the kind of that we need to be thinking about is, like when do sort of platforms become like roadways, and how do you give that kind of transparency? Because people are always like, oh, that's a biased algorithm, and that's a whole other discussion as well too. I think quite often there's really not as much bias as people think there is. It's the short story there is they're actually a reflection of what's going on in society quite often. But then, so then to answer your question about AI, it's kind of a very similar thing, is that it takes tremendous resources to make one of these AI models, a large language model. And there's a lot of like tweaking and you could say secret formulas and stuff like that go into it. And, from what I've seen, too, like, all the companies are trying to be very open and honest about how they're doing it. But I think people are going to, just naturally kind of be like, well, yeah, but what's really going on the inside? Mm-hmm. And so there's that there's kind of, it is, well, yes and no. It is happening behind closed doors. There's also a whole movement of open source models as well, too. So, and you can do some really incredible, powerful things with those. But then there's also even questions, too, about like, well, there's just lots of things about AI we don't fully understand yet. We're kind of in the alchemy stage of AI. We don't fully understand sort of like how it makes its decisions.
In this respect, though, is it a few people or is it many, many players, like in the AI industry? Like, is there many, many, many models?
Many. Well, yes and no. For the most part, many, many models, I would say. But it's kind of like every company has like their handful of flagship models.
Okay, so there's not a monopoly.
Not a monopoly, no.
So we would have like a monopoly, let's say, I think pretty easy to argue with SpaceX sending Starlink satellites into the world.
But I mean, they've got competition on their heels.
Like who?
Amazon. They're Blue Origin.
Oh, is that right?
They're sending up a constellation, and then I forget there's some company out of China that's doing it as well too.
Okay, because the last stat I saw that Elon Musk had 65% of
they're way ahead of the game.
65% of these satellites orbiting the Earth are owned by one company.
Yeah, it's a very large number.
Not even a country, right? Yeah. Company. So you could argue he's got a monopoly, but he's got, maybe 3 players coming on his heels.
Yeah.
With AI, there's not 3 players coming on to ChatGPT. We have like, how many?
I'd say at least, like for real contenders, at least 4, 5, 6.
Okay.
I mean, it depends too if you count like Asian countries that might not have the same intellectual property safeguards as we do. But there's a lot out there. So it's certainly not a monopoly right now.
Okay. I would like to move on to another concern that Pope Leo had regarding AI, and that is the unknown part of AI. We'll get back to the conversation in just a second, but a question for you. If you've been blessed by this video, you could help us out in a couple of very simple ways. Firstly, like and share this video. YouTube is going to see that and then suggest this message out to a larger audience. So that's something simple you could do. Secondly, could you pray for us? We're always in need of grace and we'd greatly appreciate your prayers. And thirdly, if it is possible, consider supporting our mission at kenandjanelle.com. Your support allows us to continue producing videos just like the one you're watching. So thank you so much for the consideration. Now back to the conversation. another concern that Pope Leo had regarding AI, and that is the unknown part of AI. He says, all of us, including those who designed them, possess only a limited understanding of their actual functioning. Mm-hmm. Indeed, current AI systems are more cultivated than built. For developers do not directly design every detail, but instead create a framework within which the intelligence grows. Fundamental scientific aspects remain at present unknown. Mm-hmm. So, is that true?
Yes. So, to go back to kind of what I was saying, we're sort of in the alchemy stage of AI. We don't fully understand how they work. And I like saying that because that's a little bit like, oh my goodness, like it's gonna gain consciousness and take over. And okay, so some of the big name, I forget which big name, I want to say, I think maybe it was Andrew Ng, came up with the alchemy analogy. So before we had the periodic table and the quantum orbital theory of chemistry, we still knew that if you took this pink chemical and this green chemical and you put them together, poof, something would happen. It would be reproducible. It was predictable. And as we did those things, we learned more and more about them. But it took us a long time until we understood, say, the fundamentals that actually caused all those things to happen. And the same thing is happening with AI right now, too. You could look at it, AI is kind of almost like a new form of mathematics. They're incredibly complicated statistical models. And so basically, we know that they are successful. We know they work. They're predictable. They're not just going to gain consciousness and do something crazy. But there are still unanswered fundamental questions about exactly how they work. And it's a whole field of research called explainability. So, the progress is being made all the time. And I'm not really worried that we're not going to find out the answers to a lot of these things. So I don't think there's really much to fear there, I guess, in that regard. And it's an interesting thing to take you back to a little bit of like the history of AI. So like back in the 80s and 90s, an era they kind of call good old-fashioned AI. It was people thinking like us, kind of injecting our thought process into it. Well, how would a thinking machine have to work? I don't know. We'd have to understand language, and then we'd have to have a graph and have it do all these things. And that whole approach of kind of rules-based AI ultimately failed. It didn't achieve any of the ends that it wanted to. And so this era of machine learning, which is kind of like, it's sort of like a black box model, and you give it a data set and you give it an objective for that data set. So say you just give it images of objects or of cats and dogs kind of a thing, and you just say, just tell me if that's a cat or a dog kind of a thing. And then you let the model learn through, it was kind of a mathematical technique for doing this. Turns out that's a much more effective way of getting a machine to do these things. And so it's kind of like a whole art. It's very much like alchemy to get these models to sort of work and behave and do useful things. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so there is an element here of what you're saying is true, that we don't exactly know the outcomes when...
I wouldn't quite say the outcomes. Okay. I would say the internals. We don't understand the why, but I would say we understand very well what the outcomes and how they behave are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one should not be concerned about a certain AI system, language model system getting completely out of control by surprise. Oh, I didn't realize I was going to do that.
Not at all. Absolutely. I think in my mind, that's absolutely ridiculous. And that's a whole other kind of tangent we could talk about. Okay. It's called the singularity. So, but no, you do not have to worry about AI gaining consciousness and getting away from our control.
What about making catastrophic mistakes that the developers did not foresee? Or can that be anticipated?
I think it can be anticipated. Yeah, I'm not worried about it. It kind of fits into this idea of the singularity. And if you want, we can kind of go into that, because I think it's kind of a fear that sort of sometimes underpins people's concerns about AI.
When you use the word singularity, can you define what that means?
Yes. So a mathematician by the name of, I think it was Ian Gooding or William Gooding in 1965 said, what if an AI could write another AI that was smarter than it? Well, then that one would go on to make another AI that was smarter than that one, and it would inevitably lead to an intelligence explosion, i.e. this exponential curve. And so people who, subscribe to this ideology, which we'll call singularism, or believe in the singularity, say that in the same way that even though a man is weaker than a lion, because a man is more intelligent than a lion, we pose an existential threat to the lion. And so if there was an even more intelligent being than us, it would pose an existential threat to us. So.
Okay. And so.
Are you worried?
So you're saying that this idea of a singularity falls apart.
It falls apart. So I think it's great for a sci-fi movie, and you see it in sci-fi movies all the time. It's a common theme. There's a lot of ways you can take the argument apart. But one of my favorite ways of doing it is, so the ancient philosophers had this idea of nobility, right? And so you could arrange an order of nobility. You could say there was a rock, and then maybe you'd have pond scum, and then you'd have plant, and then maybe you'd have an insect, and then you'd have an animal and a lion, and then a man. And pretty much everybody agrees that you can make this hierarchy of nobility. And there's all sorts of traits, like something that's lower on the hierarchy of nobility is subject to things that are higher on the hierarchy of nobility. So like plants will use bacteria, to fix nitrogen for them, the pond scum, and insects will eat plants, kind of a thing, and animals will eat insects. And, and you can come up with other proxies, such as even the length of the genome for any of these organisms tends to get longer and longer as you move up the hierarchy of nobility. So one of my counters would be is I would say, okay, if you want to be purely scientific, i.e. base your predictions on previous observations, when have you ever observed anything spontaneously jump up the hierarchy of nobility? Have you ever seen a rock spontaneously turn into a plant? Never. We never see anything jump up the hierarchy of nobility. So what gives us the hubris to think, oh, we're just going to create the next nobler thing than us? And if you really kind of start to ask, okay, well, what is this hierarchy of nobility? It's not just intelligence. That's just kind of growth in one dimension. It's maybe closer to what the philosophers would call beauty. It's a whole collection of things working towards a whole. And so there's a lot of dimensions that things, sort of have to be stronger and bigger and better in to move up the hierarchy of nobility. And so that's kind of the argument there. And people might counter like, oh, well, there's evolution. We know things go up the hierarchy of nobility. And I'm like, okay, great. We're talking now on timescales of millions of years, that's not going to be this instantaneous jump up the hierarchy of nobility. Great. Maybe in a million years, we'll be worried. And so that's just one argument. There's a lot of other ways you can take the argument apart.
Okay.
So I think with that kind of out of the way, a lot of times the fear about AI is kind of this fear that there's just going to be sudden change to it, that it's going to be just this unmanageable, and I would say it's exponential. A lot of times it's this exponential thinking, and it's like people just say, oh, we're just going to turn our brains off. Like, oh my goodness, crazy things can happen.
So we'll go back to this chart then.
Okay.
This isn't exponential growth, right?
It's not.
Yeah.
And this is a great example. You will never see an exponential anywhere in nature. There is always a plateau of some sort, always something that stops that exponential from growing infinitely. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, Pope Leo has other concern with AI. He says he's concerned with AI being equated with human intelligence. So that's paragraph 99. He said, we must avoid the misconception of equating this type of intelligence with that of human beings. These systems merely imitate certain functions of human intelligence. In doing so, they often surpass human intelligence in speed and computational capacity, offering tangible benefits across many fields. Yet, this power remains entirely tied to data processing. So the question is AI's intelligence like human intelligence?
No. And so, yeah, the way to think about it, and he talks a little bit more about this later on, is think of it as an intelligence reflector. It's like a mirror. So the way all these models work is with this idea of a data set distribution. So you give it 1 million pictures of cats, you train your model, all it's going to give you is another picture of a cat. It's going to be a completely different cat, but it's somehow learned the essence of catness. But it has no conception of sort of like the real world of what defined a cat, of, that cat's DNA or anything. It's simply sort of looking at the effects of that object, of that cat. It sort of learned what pixels look like when they're projected into a camera, and it's going to come up with reproductions like that. And so that underpins all of AI. So even when you work with a chatbot, it's been trained on billions of pages of text from all sorts of data sets and libraries and different corpuses. And so from that, it has basically learned the patterns of, human speech and behavior. And, it can do, honestly, like it can do some incredible things. There's a lot we need to learn there. And even I do think it should also give us a whole new respect for the power of human language. And, to bring this to, to our faith, it's like, the Word. I love the opening of John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Like, wow, there's something really powerful about language. And so even Geoffrey Hinton, he's regarded as like one of the godfathers of AI. He said, yeah, we used to think, language was just something that was sort of like a byproduct, or like that we would use it to communicate results after the AI had figured out what the answer was. And he said, no, it turns out that if you can just teach it language, you've basically taught it how to think. It can do all sorts of kind of amazing things with language. So language, it should give us a respect for language and the power of language. So that's basic. But yeah, the key thing is it has only learned that from our documents and our writings and our pictures of cats and things like that. It's merely a reflection of what we've given it. It does not sort of have the intrinsic essence of what those things are.
Because when we talk about intelligence and artificial intelligence and human intelligence, isn't one of the fundamental differences is that our intelligence is a function of our soul. We have a spiritual soul that we've been endowed with from God that has the capacity to know things and to choose things. And that's part of being human. AI, the fundamental difference, it's not endowed with these capacities, right?
Yep.
That its learning is based upon human patterns that have been already chosen. So can a AI create? Can it create?
Oh, good question. Yes and no. I'll say no. It cannot create in sort of the truest sense. And the example I heard for this that I really like is, could it come up with a new genre of music? And someone pointed out that genres of music are essentially people from one community or one culture speaking to other members of that community. And you think of like hip hop, right? It's all braggadocio. I'm the meanest, baddest rapper around, and they're just talking to the other rappers, kind of a thing, Or country music, they're singing to the other cowboys, and so really, to come up with a new genre of music, you'd have to have a whole new culture of human beings, who want to speak and talk to each other and say things to each other. And it's like, well, what are you going to do? Simulate a whole, species of human beings or something like that? Like that, just completely out of the picture. So in that sense, no, you can't. What it can do, though, is you can cross concepts with it. And an early example of this that was sort of well publicized, when they first came up with image generating AIs, is it said, give me an armchair in the shape of an avocado. And I think they had shown it had never seen an avocado-shaped armchair before, but it knew what an avocado was, it knew what an armchair was, and it could sort of cross those concepts together. And it came up with some really brilliant designs for like avocado armchairs. I'm like, I want that avocado armchair. That's kind of a clever design. So in that sense, you know, they can kind of come up with new things and new ideas. And I mean, they're already making, you know, scientific discoveries. Like there was some big mathematical proof that was just solved recently. So yeah, so yes and no. I'm going to say no to creation in the truest sense. But yes, they can do some very novel things, but they're still going to be kind of within scribed bounds, I think.
Yeah, Elon Musk made a prediction regarding AI, and I'm assuming it was in reference to his language model, that it will develop to the point where you can give a person a medical diagnosis based upon its unique DNA, the person's unique DNA. Is that something that's realistic?
So I don't like Elon Musk. I mean, I like Elon Musk, but I don't like any of Elon Musk's technical predictions. Like people I know have worked with him, they're like, he's a marketer, he's an entrepreneur, he's not a technical genius by any stretch. So he's a smart guy, but technically he's not that bright. He knows how to hire bright people, I would say. That aside, I think honestly, I think biotech has sort of been predicting that already for a long time, that you can determine a huge amount already from a person's genome for what diseases they would be susceptible to, for sure. So yeah, I'd expect advances like that.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Pope Leo has another concern about AI, and that is the impact it may have on the environment. Current AI systems require enormous amounts of energy and water, significantly influencing carbon dioxide emissions, and place heavy demands on natural resources. As their complexity increases, especially in the case of large language models, the need for computing power and storage capacities grow too, which requires an extensive network of machines, cables, data centers, and energy-intensive infrastructure. For this reason, it is essential to develop more sustainable technology solutions that reduce environmental impact and help protect our common home. Is that a valid concern, or is there another way of looking at this?
Okay, so my reaction when I read that was, I'm like, this feels a little short-sighted, just because, you know, technology advances quickly, especially when it comes to things like energy efficiency. So I'm kind of like, that might only be a concern for the next few years, for all we know. If I'm going to give it a more critiqued, more nuanced answer, I would say TBD. And so the first thing to point out is that AI training uses just as much power as Bitcoin does right now. And what's kind of ironic about Bitcoin is that it wastes power by design. There's this thing in it called proof of work, and it sort of forces you to waste energy. But it's also the mechanism by which Bitcoin is secured and actually makes Bitcoin successful. So like it's kind of a crazy concept, but like underpinning Bitcoin is this concept that nobody can trust each other. So we have to force ourselves to do this crazy amount of work and just waste energy. So if I were to like look at technologies and say which one is kind of like a little bit more morally abhorrent, I would point the finger at Bitcoin and say, yeah, maybe if we just trusted each other, we could have a more efficient technology. Like you could just snap your fingers and all that power wastage would be gone. To go back to AI, so the reason I would say TBD is the reason we call them large language models.
What's TBD?
Okay, sorry. TBD, to be determined. To be determined. Sorry. That should be clear there.
Thank you.
Yes. Is that, so the reason we call large language models large is that what we have found is that as we give them more data and more memory and more compute, they only get better. And we have not found an upper limit to how much compute and data and memory you can give them, and then they will stop improving. And so, like, you know, looking at that graph, we kind of have no idea how high it could get. And so this is the era we're in right now, is what they're calling like the hyperscaler era. Like everybody in tech knows this, and they're going, oh my goodness, we got to make the biggest, baddest microchip. And so they're trying to scale them as big as possible. Now, do I think we will make advances to make those more efficient? I'd say yes. And the reason I would say that is I'd say, like, look at our human brain. Like, the numbers of what the human brain is doing is just far beyond what any of these AI models can do. And the human brain is much more efficient. So there are lots of ways you can make these models more efficient. So honestly, I'm not too worried about the long-term, energy usage of AI. I think for right now, it's something we certainly should be looking at and be concerned about, but in the long term, I'm not really concerned.
Okay, so I had a different thought, and I'd like your critique on my thought.
Okay.
So the environmental impact may be real, but it's also, these large language models are also, they could be reducing environmental impacts in other areas because of what they can do.
Absolutely.
So, for example, let's say the technology that we used to have of printing pictures, how much paper we used. We go into every drugstore or grocery store and you can print your pictures. Now you have trouble. You have to go to a specialty shop to print your pictures because we have digital photographs now.
Yeah.
And so we've had technology that has reduced an environmental impact. So could it be argued that AI could actually reduce the environmental impact?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a whole area of AI for science. And I think we'll find some amazing things through the use of AI, like material science. You can find better solar panels and, better semiconductors, more efficient, better drugs for diseases and things like that. So I think there's a lot of promise there. And, like, in my opinion, it's energy well spent.
Okay. Another concern that Pope Leo has is regarding the bias of the designer.
Okay.
Yet there is also a subtle danger for when an AI system presents themselves as neutral and objective. They end up reflecting and reinforcing stereotypes or ideological biases of their designer and developers. That's you.
Okay, so this is something really interesting.
So is this a misunderstanding?
I'm gonna say it's a bit of a misemphasis.
Okay.
Not with all due respect to Pope Leo. So the thing, this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about recommendation algorithms, is that it's far less about the bias of the developers and far more about the bias of the users. So it's a reflection of the users of that particular platform. And so, people will, they'll say things like, oh, it's more liberal bias than it is, conservative bias kind of a thing. And it's like, okay, well, you can even just do a little bit of quick statistics and say, okay, well, what is the demographic that uses these technologies? Oh, they tend to be younger and richer. What are the political biases of people who are younger and richer? Oh, well, yeah, they do tend to be biased, one way or the other. So that's a source of quote unquote bias. You could also have people, I don't know, say you're political party A and political party B, right? And people from political party A tend to only watch their own videos, but people from political party B are a little bit more even-minded, so they watch both political party videos, both A and B. Well, now that means political party A has twice as many views as political party B's videos do. And so it's like, oh, that's interesting. So that's also a source of bias. So there's a lot of these sources of bias. And the main thing about AI or machine learning is it all comes from the data in the first place. And so, if it only ever show it pictures of short hair cats, it's only going to come up with pictures of other short hair cats. If you only show it pictures of black cats, it's only going to develop, other black cats. And honestly, and it's sort of its rawest, purest form, it will give you back that exact data set distribution. Now, there's lots of research into, like, how do you shape that into kind of the right distribution that you want? And so it's a mirror, but it's very much like a, distorted mirror kind of a thing. And so I think maybe what I would resist a little bit would be the implication that all of the bias comes from the developers, whereas, like, for AI or for ML, as a developer, you kind of have to work hard to then inject your bias into it. And then even doing that is quite difficult. So it's far easier and far more successful to just kind of use the data set distribution.
So the things that you are working on, we're not going to see Mark Matthews' bias slipping into.
Exactly. No, it's hard to do that. And I mean, also it's like put it this way, like I'm not worried about tech companies. I'm more worried about like state actors, people who want to use AI to influence a platform in a particular way because it supercharges like fake users or fake opinions, like even, this is going to get me on a blacklist, but China has like the 50-cent army. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it was known for a long time that they would pay people 50 cents for every social media post they would put in favor of the Communist Party of China. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, most platforms probably wouldn't want that. They wouldn't want those kinds of posts on their platform. But how do you stop that? It's like, oh, those are real people. You can verify them as real individuals. And so that becomes very difficult. And so I think AI makes that kind of thing much more possible and much more doable. And so that's where you're going to see, I think, bias coming from. I'm not really so worried about, let's say, Western tech companies. I'm worried about, say, more external actors and bias in that regard. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Pope Leo has also concerned about accountability issues regarding AI. In paragraph 105. In many cases, however, the internal processes lead to a result remain opaque, meaning it's hard to assign responsibility and correct errors. This is where accountability becomes crucial. The possibility of identifying who must account for decisions, justify them, monitor them, and when necessary, challenge them and remedy any harm caused. How do you do that? I mean, you're a developer, right?
Yeah.
And my question is that on you or is it more about the user?
It's a great question. I think it's ultimately more in the hands of the user, just because. So there's
basically about some of the things that you've already talked about.
Well, I think it's and you have to, like, people have to be educated. There's a phenomenon called cognitive surrender, where it's people think like, oh, just because it came from a computer or from a chatbot, oh, it's got to be the right answer, and I'm just not going to think about it. I'm going to turn off my brain, kind of a thing. I'm going to surrender my thought to the AI, and we have to learn. We have to teach ourselves that, oh, the AI can be wrong. It can give you the wrong answer, and it can have the wrong data set distribution, even though it might be tempting or easy to just accept its answer for what it is. Now, for a lot of things, it's not a big deal. If it's like, oh, I don't know, like, I don't know, which vegetables should I plant in my garden? Okay, great. I'm just going to pick its first answer. Maybe it's wrong, but maybe it's only wrong with like a 1 or 2% odds kind of a thing. Great. Yeah, I'll just plant this breed of carrots. Well, if you're a doctor and you're asking, what do I think the possible diseases, that my patient might have be, it's like, well, you don't just want to accept it carte blanche. You have to ultimately be responsible for any decisions you make for, say, treatment. And so even though it might make it very easy to come up with answers or courses of action, I think the responsibility still falls on the user to know those things. And so for developers, it's like, yes, if we're making a medical application or something like that, we'd probably put safeguards in, like a reminder, like, are you absolutely sure, kind of a thing. But I think ultimately it's going to come down to the users to really know and be responsible for those things.
Okay. So thanks for that answer. We move on to another concern Pope Leo has, and that is about having oversight on AI.
Okay.
Paragraph 105. It is not enough to invoke ethics in the abstract. Robust legal frameworks, independent oversight, inform users and political systems that does not abdicate its responsibility are required. So it just seems like he's saying, we need to oversee some of this. My question is, Well, how is that possible?
It's difficult because it takes an incredible amount of work to create an AI model right now. And I think anyone who's going to put in the billions upon billions upon billions of dollars, are probably hoping to get at least a little bit of money out of it. So they're going to keep some of that stuff to themselves. So that's kind of a difficult thing. And, I believe in, certain aspects of our free market. So yeah, I think they do have kind of a right to those things. I think maybe it's really more of a question, like this is the kind of thing, that happens like, as a technology develops like 10, 20, 30 years down the road, like I forget which the absolute first phone company was it Bell or AT&T or something like that. But, like they put tremendous effort into developing, the phone systems and laying cables and connecting everyone. But eventually at some point, society had to essentially regulate them as kind of like a common good in a sense, and so they enacted a lot more laws for these sort of infrastructure companies. And so that has happened in a number of technical domains. How exactly you do that with AI, I think is kind of like is unknown. I mean, it's certainly possible. You could do all sorts of things, but I mean, if you were to, I don't know, if you were a state actor and you just said, no, we're only going to have entirely, publicly open government developed AI, it's just like, okay, great. You're going to lose the AI race sort of a thing. And some other country's going to do it better than you. And so, that's not really an answer either.
So from an insider's point of view, ought it to be regulated? Or before you answer that, because many people will get uncomfortable with that because, let's say here in Canada, we have the Canadian government trying to regulate speech in pretty heavy-handed ways with bills coming into law potentially. And even what we're seeing on social media, our government has regulated that. We can't, for example, on Facebook, we don't see news stories, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Government has pulled that out.
Yeah.
You want to go and learn about news? Well, we have our certain places that have been encouraged where people are going. So we have like heavy-handed regulation, in my opinion, in Canada. It sounds like maybe you agree on some of those points. I don't want the Canadian government regulating AI.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's true. I mean, yeah, especially if it's like you're not agreeing with your government's, opinions and viewpoints. And what's interesting too is with a lot of technologies, like things that you think you'd be worried about, like people are like, oh, we can't put electricity into homes, like sparks are just going to fly out of the walls and it's going to kill people. And it's kind of like, okay, well, no, that hasn't really come to fruition. We developed safe ways, to deliver electricity to homes. But, like something like seatbelts in cars, right? Like, I don't know what the exact time frame was, but they certainly were not standard or required on, the initial automobiles. It didn't take until like decades or years later that like, oh, hey, this is actually an issue. We really, probably should have some kind of safety mechanism. And oh, wow, alcohol, that's a really bad mix together with driving. Yeah, we should actually have some laws against that. So I would generally take a hands-off approach. Like it's difficult to predict what some of these ills will be. Like you can always, legislate and regulate after the fact. So in general, I think that would be my suggestion. Like generally as a society, if something is becoming a kind of a very large problem, like everybody can see it, people can agree on it and they're like, yeah, we need to
we need seatbelts.
Yeah, we need seatbelts. Yeah. Oh, we need strict laws against drunk driving. But oh, you know what? We also need public awareness campaigns about drunk driving. We need actually public awareness campaigns about seatbelts as well too. And you could even say the same thing too about social media, right? Like, social media came out, great, yeah, I'm gonna give my 12-year-old, social media account kind of a thing. And, only now all this research is coming out that, oh, it's actually pretty bad for teens. They don't socialize well. Mental health issues, increase because of it. So, actually we probably should limit the amount of time teens spend on social media.
Okay, so your approach, a little bit more hands-off.
I'd be more hands-off, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, I would go back to my point there that I think sometimes when people are like, oh my goodness, it's going to take over. It's going to become conscious and it's going to subjugate us to a life of slavery. It's like, no, it's not. It's as powerful as electricity or splitting the atom, but it is not going to just spontaneously, become intelligent and take over us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Another concern Pope Leo has is the harm it may do or does do to human connection. When words are simulated, they do not build genuine relationships, but only their appearance. The artificial imitation of care or support can become particularly risky when it enters contexts where real relationships and emotional bonds are lacking. Here, the danger is not so much that the person may believe they are communicating with another person, but rather they may gradually lose the very desire to form genuine human connections. Your thoughts?
Okay, so I'm saying don't worry about the singularity. If people ask me what's my real concern, it's that. To give you an example, so this has already been going on. And I'd like to point out the idea of the TV sitcom. So TVs, have you heard of mirror neurons?
No.
Okay, so a mirror neuron is basically, they've actually found these neurons in your brain. They fire whether you're actually doing something or whether you're watching someone do that thing. And they're kind of like, they're like foundational to our understanding of the human person and our faith, what did Christ say about even thinking about a woman lustfully? He said like, oh, it's kind of almost the same as actually doing that thing. So it's like, yeah, we know this. So think about a sitcom. It's like, did that scratch some itch? Did your mirror neuron go off that you were actually socializing with people? And kind of the next day, if you watch Seinfeld, you could say, hey, did you see that crazy thing Kramer did? Oh yeah, wasn't that funny? It was almost this social thing. You could talk about the people on a sitcom almost as though they were your friends. Somehow you're getting that need for socialization scratched without genuinely getting real human connection. And so technology has been facilitating this kind of thing since the beginning, since a lot of these information technologies came out. As someone who has been plugged into entertainment industry for a number of years, and seeing kind of like what's on the horizon for a lot of these new AI technologies, I'm just like, oh yeah, it's going to get people sucked right in, to the point where, you could have like, like you could be like, oh, well, give me a movie, that has all my, has my friend in it. Actually, make that a movie with me as the super. Actually, make me look like Conan the Barbarian. Yeah, so it could make whatever kind of like movie you want. It could have interactive experiences.
You think that's all coming?
It is all coming. I mean, a bunch of it has already been released. I think it's sort of. It's proven technology now. It is just not fully deployed to the whole world, and so it's really kind of a question of like, how will the world react to those things? And I mean, even social media, right? Like it's kind of like they're selling your friends back to yourself. You get to see, what your friends are doing, but did you really develop that real human connection? And so something I really like about this document is how often Pope Leo stresses sort of the importance of real human experiences, of like interacting with people, of having real relationships, even the hardships that come from real relationships. And so it's kind of like, well, hey, like, you could just have a virtual friend that just tell me that I'm good looking. There's no, like, oh, virtual friends, like, oh, they're better looking to look at. They don't smell. They tell good jokes. So I just think it's like, yeah, it's gonna suck us in.
Do you think that's happening right now? Like I'm not aware of this stuff as much as you. Like, is that?
There's no one commercial. The technology. So right now, that sort of interactive technology has just been developed. I don't think it's really being deployed anywhere yet, but I think it's very much on the horizon. So watch for it, like in the next year or two.
So the practical applications, what do you see happening with that?
So there's also, okay, like in terms of like say interactive stuff, like all sorts of really good experience, like good possibilities, like tutoring, having your own personal tutor or something like that, even potentially, I don't know, like medical applications or I don't know, maybe there's a question there too of like.
So how does that, what's the experience of, like, is it like a person's face on a computer monitor and is talking back to you, or is it a robot that's interacting with you.
So not robotics. The stuff I'm talking about right now would be like just a face on a monitor kind of a thing. So potential good applications to that, potential bad applications to that could be things like pornography, which would just be like, oh man, like that I sort of shudder to think about. Like that could be really bad. Robotics, that's a whole other area as well too, that is not as nearly as mature as say like these language models are, but I also see that, developing quite a bit as well too. And that will also have the potential to replace a lot of human labor, say that the Industrial Revolution couldn't replace. So lots of changes coming.
Okay. So is there a question that you wish I would have asked you about AI that I haven't asked you yet, that you think would be really great for maybe a Catholic audience to know?
Oh, gee, that's a good question. You know what? What I do find, what I find interesting is how often, at least the world, when they are dealing with kind of this idea of superintelligence, they're actually dealing with a religious idea. So like what I like to point out is, why do you think that as soon as we had a superintelligent AI, that it's going to want to kill us all and subjugate us to a life of slavery? Why would you not think that it's going to turn to you and say, hey, you need to explain yourself. You need to explain your existence. You need to explain why you live in such a wonderful, amazing world. It's really what they're seeing. Like God is the only true super intelligent being. And so it's how they're seeing God. They're seeing God as like, oh, the only way a super intelligent being is one that would want to kill us all. So there's a lot of kind of like very deep spiritual connections I think you could kind of draw from, like, once people start thinking about superintelligence and intellect, like they're actually thinking about God a lot of the time.
Wow.
So
fascinating. So enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah.
Will you do this again?
Yeah, anytime.
Okay.
I love talking about AI and technology. So
thanks, Mark.
You're very welcome. Honored to be here. So